Hello everybody, I'm Alyssa from Meditative Astrology. Today we're going to walk through the astrology of May 17th through 23rd. We have a ton of aspects that are going on. There's a lot going on in Gemini. I feel like all of the transits that are going on and all of the craziness is a little bit indicative of the Gemini energy and the multiplicity that we're going to talk about this week. So before we get into all of that, if you haven't already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button here on YouTube so that way you don't miss anything that we have going on. These weekly videos, they come out every Saturday so that way you can have them ahead of the upcoming week. On Sunday evenings, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, we have an astrologically guided meditation. So that's a live meditation where we can come together to a common space within our own personal space and really bring the astrology that is above all of us down to a personal level. We talk about it a little bit, maybe lean into it in a specific way, but then we move into that meditative space, into that quiet contemplative space where we can really create the conversations with the astrology, the energy, and bringing it down into our lives and really connecting with it and how it's working within the symbolism is showing up in our own lives personally. That makes it much more meaningful, much deeper in my opinion, and much more intimate. So join us for live meditations. You're going to want to find us on social media as well, Facebook and Instagram. That's where all updates and schedule changes and things like that are shared. So all the informational things will be there, as well as the weekly intention that comes out Friday evenings. That correlates with the upcoming week's astrology and then plays directly into our meditation. I like to have you have the intention to possibly sit with if you'd like to before the weekly video comes out, maybe come to some of your own conclusions and recognitions, and then we come to the collective space together on Sunday. So really looking to give you a process through the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, to move into the week feeling a little more connected, maybe a little more grounded, and a little bit more consciously aware of some of the things that are around. So let's connect on all the things and walk this astrological journey together if you are interested. With that being said, let's go ahead and get right into this week. We start out right away on Sunday the 17th with Mercury moving into the sign of Gemini. It's moving from the sign of Taurus into its home sign of Gemini, so it has dignity here. It's within its domicile. Mercury is able to act very mercurial, where maybe the sign of Taurus was a little more grounded, a little more stable, a little more slow process, dedicated and committed. Those are all good things and probably were very beneficial coming off of Mercury being in the sign of Aries. But now that Mercury moves into the sign of Gemini, it's much more open, much more free to express, to explore, and to find curiosity. There's a lot of wonder, there's a lot of imagination, and there's a lot of leaning into different possibilities in the sign of Gemini. So when Mercury moves into there, the ruler, we are able to expand our mind in different ways. We are able to have a little bit of openness, a little curiosity. Maybe we are open to different perspectives. There's different conversations that can pop up. Communications can show up in different ways, and really just a busyness and a bustling and a moving. And it can feel like things are just flowing, even if they're not staying and sticking around for a while. Sometimes in Gemini, our attention can drift from one thing to another because multiple things catch our attention and catch our eye. We're interested and we're generally curious about bringing more information, under more knowledge, and maybe understanding things a little bit deeper or looking at little different parts of things. So this can be an exciting time as Mercury moves into the sign of Gemini. Communication becomes key here. Asking questions and exploring dualities. Gemini is the mutable sign of Mercury, of Hermes. When we talk about Mercury, we look at some of the paradoxes of life, or where there are contrasting things that can exist at one time. Mercury, Hermes, is the messenger god who can travel between worlds most quickly. It changes its phase most often. It comes in contact with the sun most often. This is why we hear about Mercury retrograde, what feels like, every other month, because it's coming up, it comes up more quickly than the other ones do. Mercury is the only planet that does not have an assigned gender to it. Its gender is based on its phasal dynamic, where it is in relation to the sun. Now, other planets have morning star, evening star phases where they express themselves maybe a little more masculine or feminine. You can think of Mars or Venus here. But those planets also have an assigned gender, right? Mars we consider to be more masculine. Venus we consider to be more feminine, and those are the quintessential energies of the masculine and the feminine energy. Mercury's not like that. Mercury does not have its own assigned, it's much more gender fluid. So the exploring of dualities, or how different things can exist at one time, it can be very paradoxical and it can feel very contrasting, but Gemini is that space that can hold that. We see that being in the mutable place that Gemini finds itself in within the solar year. So Mercury moves into Gemini in the morning, 6:26 a.m. Eastern Time, always Eastern times, and you can translate to your own time zone depending on where you are located. By the evening, Mercury comes into contact with Uranus here. So as soon as Mercury moves into the sign of Gemini, we can say that these two planets are coming together. Really, the exact conjunction is within 14 hours of each other here. So this is the first meeting of many with the years we have ahead of Uranus being in the sign of Gemini. We have the next 7 or so years with Uranus and Gemini, and when Mercury comes around into this space, they're going to contact each other. This is the first time that these two planets are meeting. So this may feel like it really is starting to activate or show us glimpses of where Uranus in the sign of Gemini is going to be playing out within our own lives, within our own charts. So look at where Gemini is within your chart if you have access to that. We can always do a reading if you have your birth information to look at that together. When these two planets come together, anywhere, but specifically in the sign of Gemini, where Mercury is, again, in its home sign, there is mental insights and breakthroughs that can come through here. Sharing ideas, exciting conversations. Mercury is the planet of communications, of the intermental workings. And in Gemini, again, it's moving quickly, it's moving fluidly, it's asking questions, it's looking to understand new things. When it comes into contact in those very early degrees, 1 degree, of Gemini with Uranus, the planet that liberates or shows us things that we can't quite unsee, that bring our perspective or our understanding to a new level of some kind. I'm hesitant to say the next level. It can often feel like we are moving up in our understanding because things are opening, there's breakthroughs, there's understandings where maybe we weren't able to see the full picture or the full perspective or the multiplicity of perspectives. But that is not always necessarily positive or negative. It depends on our own experience, right? So bringing us to a new level of understanding, of opening mentally. I'm wondering about things being active and being activated. Again, I'm looking at Mercury being the activator coming into the door of the sign of Gemini, its home sign. It's like it's walking back inside its house and saying, hey, Uranus, I'm here. So there's an activation that can come, right? So think about when you are in somebody else's house, like maybe if you used to babysit when you were a teenager, or maybe that's something that you do now, babysitting. Think about, in the evening after you've put the kids to bed and you are relaxing watching TV, waiting for the parents to come home, and maybe you're starting to doze off a little bit watching the TV show. They open the door, they walk in, you're awake, and you're talking and you're communicating again. It's kind of like you've been awakened or you've been activated in some way when they come home, for whatever reason. Mercury moving into Gemini is like it's activating or waking up Uranus, knocking on the door and saying, hey, I'm back. So there's an activation that can be here. With both of these planets and how quickly they move and how swift and how sudden they are, in the sign of Gemini, which in the mental sphere can have a lot to do with our nervous system, Uranus can be very electrifying and be very, very activating, wondering about an overstimulation potentially coming through here in some sort of way. So it's like the parents come home and you were supposed to clean up after the dinner that you made, but you didn't make the dinner, right? Very mundane example. Your experience could be nothing like that, but just as a symbolic example. The overstimulation, your heart starts pounding and you start scrambling to try to start doing things before they get all the way in the house or something like that. So being activated versus being overstimulated here. Watch for overstimulation. Watch for too much information coming in. Maybe we need to slow ourselves down a little bit here. There can be shocking or surprising moments when Uranus is activated, and these things can come through very quickly, again, because these two planets move quickly. The sign of Gemini moves quickly. And both of these planets have the tendency to go against the status quo, or at least have the willingness and the interest in experimenting. So again, this is bringing in that theme of multiplicity. What if we saw a different perspective? What if we tried something a little bit different? What if we did something, so slightly different than the way that we've done it before? I'm thinking about this video that I'm recording right now. It's going to be coming out at a different time than my other videos have came out. And even though it's just before this conjunction, I can feel that in the air, kind of moving along with this. So look for this opening here at the beginning of the week, even Saturday into Sunday. So that's like the 16th into the 17th here. It's really, really kind of activating our week as we move into the week. And there is no shortage of aspects through the rest of the week here either. So we're going to go ahead and move forward from Sunday into Monday here, where we have a ton of aspects. In fact, I didn't even put the lunar aspects on this card that we have here because we have 4 other aspects that we're going to talk about. So the moon starts out in the sign of Gemini. That is something that I maybe should have mentioned on talking about Sunday. When we have all this Gemini energy coming through here with Mercury and Uranus and the ingresses into this sign here, we had the moon in the sign of Gemini at the same time. Saturday into Sunday into Monday is a very Gemini type period. So again, looking at those house topics of your chart of where Gemini falls, you really might start to get a feel for that house if you kind of look at what plays out for you over here through the weekend. So the moon starts in the sign of Gemini on Monday, and then it moves into the sign of Cancer about 8:45 p.m. Eastern time, and it's going to make a conjunction with Venus, which we're going to talk about today because she's making aspects. And they actually are following each other. So Venus and the moon are sitting together at the very end of Gemini, but then they also come together at the very beginning of Cancer. So they're traveling together in a way here. So as you can see, we have quite a few aspects that are coming through here this week. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put the chart up so that way you all can see these aspects showing up on the chart here. This will help. I'm going to go ahead and move that chart forward here from Sunday into Monday here, and we can take a peek here. So you can see that here we have the moon and Venus sitting together at the end of Gemini, and again they're going to move together almost simultaneously into the sign of Cancer, which is going to activate Venus a little bit more here. So as Mercury comes into the sign of Gemini, it makes that aspect with Uranus, and then just after the aspect with Uranus, it's going to move into a sextile with Neptune coming through here. This sextile between Mercury and Neptune feels like it's really going to increase Mercury's ability to expand and see beyond the rational and logical processes in the sign of Gemini. It feels like it's going to bring in the imagination, the magic, and the wonder much more than it has before. With Neptune being in the sign of Aries, this feels very much like a just try it energy. Go for it, see what happens. Again, very highly creative and imaginative. I feel like if Gemini is one of those signs that is fluid and considers multiple things, and Neptune is the sign that, or the planet that dissolves boundaries, it can feel very easy to let our feet move off the ground and maybe feel ungrounded in some sort of way. Now that can be helpful, or that can be a shadow side depending on the experience, of course. But it can allow us to open ourselves to different possibilities, to different inspirations that can be coming through here. And we're talking about Aries and we're talking about Gemini. So again, it can come through really, really quickly here. Looking at marrying passion and drive and intuitive curiosities, that's looking at the signs that these planets are in. Neptune has passion within it. It has connection that we feel deep within it. There's passion and there's drive in the sign of Aries, the fiery sign that begins the zodiac with springtime. Intuitive curiosities, intuitive energy is very much part of Neptune. But I think there is a intuitiveness of Mercury and Gemini of being able to flow into the next step. It's like being in a flow state of any kind. And those can show up for many of us in different ways. Just think about those things that you can do, and it just feels like it just flows and it just moves, and the next step just opens up for it. It might be something that you do often, so it's just, you can almost do it like on autopilot, or one of those things where it's just like each step is just flowing, and the next thing that you need is exactly where it's supposed to be, and there's no speed bumps or slowdowns or anything like that. Following the stimulant or the activator here feels like something that is present within this energy. So if Mercury and Uranus have opened us up to new possibilities, maybe Neptune, or shown us new possibilities, or shown us new perspectives, or the breakthrough, or the new understanding, or the new vision of some kind. I'm wondering about the sextile to Neptune, which essentially is happening almost simultaneously with how quickly Neptune moves, or with how quickly Mercury moves. Wondering about that opening that comes through, or that understanding, if there's something that it prompts us into that we can feel within us, and then we move forward with that in a creative and imaginative space, or something that we can just feel deep within us in some sort of way. So Mercury and Neptune coming through here at the beginning of the week. At the same time, we have a sextile between Venus and Mars. So if you look at Venus at 29 degrees of Gemini, we also have Mars at 29 degrees of Aries. This is a really interesting cycle that happens here, because these two planets are conjoining each other at the last degree of these signs that they are in. Mars is within its own sign, and then it's going to move into the sign of Taurus, where it's debilitated and does not have dignity, but it's going to move into Venus's sign as Venus moves into the sign of Cancer at the same time here. So there's a process or a conversation that is happening between these two planets. When Venus and Mars make an interaction to each other, a sextile, the sextile is not the loudest aspect, but it's a harmonious aspect. It's an aspect where these two planets can work together. And they're going to be traveling across these sign boundaries together in a little bit of a transitional process where it feels like a conversation and a support that is happening. I'm looking at Mars moving from its home sign of Aries, moving into Venus's sign of Taurus, where it is debilitated, but it's having an interaction with Venus at the same time here. So it's like Venus is able to help Mars as it moves through this in some sort of way. This is the masculine and the feminine energy coming together in receptivity as it moves from the masculine signs to the feminine signs. They are completing something. They're completing a journey in one area of our lives, and they're moving to another one, and they're moving to it together. So it's almost like there is a cohesion or a flow that is happening as these planets shift from one area of our lives to another. When you have the lovers coming together, the masculine and the feminine, Mars and Venus, the dance between polarities and dualities occur. Again, it's a sextile, so it's favorable, and it's mutually beneficial. These two planets, when they come together, we can have persistence, yet compassion. We can have pursuing, yet attracting. Again, this amplifies a little bit of the multiplicity that we have coming through here this week, yet in a different way. There's flow, there's unity, and differences can come together. Think about masculine and feminine energy. Think about extrovert and introvert. Think about impressing upon others and receiving from others. You can think about the contrast between the sun and the moon as a different symbolic resonance to kind of bring in that duality and that dance between these two planets. So conversation of traveling. Let's talk to each other. Let's speak to each other, right? Mars moves into the sign of Taurus, and this may slow the impulses of Mars. So take what was initiated in the sign of Aries and maybe bring some substance to it. We've talked about this with the other planets that have moved from the sign of Aries into the sign of Taurus. It can also have us embodying the impulses that come through, because Mars is still drive, ambition, and impulses, and what pulls us, right? So if Taurus is the earthly place of Venus, there is so much embodiment in the sign of Taurus. There's so much about feeling within to our skin and within to our physical senses and into the material world. So this is where, you know, what we find to be pleasurable and what we find to be joyful, and where we find just general enjoyment and find growth and prosperity in life, and unity and coming together to move simultaneously can be a part of the sign of Taurus. Well, these are things that are opposite of Venus, or of Mars, who is a little bit more about separation and, you know, severing and pulling things apart and moving quickly. Taurus moves much slower, so it slows Mars in a certain type of way. Again, the dignity, Mars is in its detriment in the sign of Taurus because it's opposite its domicile of Scorpio. So the difference between Venus and Mars is amplified here. That multiplicity shows up again. In this aspect, Mars is in the superior position. So Mars is asking for help from Venus, who can help well for somebody that's in the sign of Taurus. It can help well because Mars is within its home sign, so it's almost like it's able to direct Mars of like what the rules and what the guidelines are here. So that way you at least have some sort of parameters to attempt to work within. But Venus is also moving into the sign of Cancer. So as it moves into the sign of Cancer, it can help well through Cancerian lunar things, which resonate with Taurus quite well. You know, Cancer is ruled by the moon, so it's ruled by lunar themes, and we see that within the significations of Cancer. The moon is exalted in the sign of Taurus. So when you can see that relationship and you can think about what the moon represents as far as growth and prosperity and nurturing and comfort and a place to be able to grow from, there's correlations between Taurus and Cancer. So it feels like Venus, on top of being the ruler of Taurus, has its ways that it might very much be able to help Mars in a couple different ways by bringing in lunar themes. So it can provide sensitivity. It can provide emotional driven support, which aligns with Taurus again, with the moon being exalted here. We just had the exalted new moon that came through in the sign of Taurus at the end of last week, initiating support in different ways. We talked about that in last week's video, so if you missed that, you can go back and take a look at that. But the interaction with Venus, the ruler at the outset, may soften the clunkiness that we can find sometimes with Mars in the sign of Taurus. Taurus wants flow, ease, patience, it wants longevity, it wants enjoyment, and it wants unity. It wants growth, which is quite the opposite of Aries, the domicile of Mars, where it's just coming from. So Mars has been in the battleground. It's been in its normal expressive fight or flight, or, you know, working very hard or striving for something mode that has been here. So now this is like, again, putting the brakes on Mars coming through here. Mars in the sign of Taurus, because it still wants to fight and it still wants to move on behalf of something, we may be fighting on behalf of these Venusian themes, looking for joy, looking for pleasure, looking for a relationship, looking for being able to connect with others and being able to connect with ourselves and embody ourselves. And I think that with Uranus recently departed from the sign of Taurus, a lot of the nervous system things that have shown up, I think Uranus can be associated with the nervous system in any sign, but showing up differently. I think there's a lot of people that are noticing the way the nervous system is affecting and working within the body. So when Mars comes in here, just after the new moon that we had here, it's interacting with Venus. It's like we are shown a way, hey, it's time for you to slow down, and maybe Mars in Taurus is forcing us to slow down in some sort of way. You need to slow down and provide a little care, provide a little tenderness for yourself. Venus in the sign of Cancer can speak to that at the same time, and may ease some of these maybe little more difficult or shadow things that we can see with Mars in the sign of Taurus. Sometimes with Mars and Taurus, we can think of a toddler in a china shop, right? There is fragile things that are surrounding us. And it's possible that we can cause harm without really realizing it until afterwards, because perhaps our intentions were on par, right? Perhaps our intentions or our motivations are Venusian, but we're moving in a Martian or a Mars type way. So we're cutting and severing things that maybe should be left to grow, or, you know, the tender, fragile things in the sign of Taurus that were initiated still need a lot of care and love. Think about the early days of the garden where they They're very vulnerable to the elements and to not having enough proper nutrition and things like that. That's the sign of Taurus. Even though it's solid and it's stable and it can be stubborn, it can be hard to move and it can feel like a rock and a stone, there's also tender spaces that really need care to be able to grow from. Again, the correlation between Venus, the connection between Venus and the moon coming through here. It can be stubborn motivations. We can be unwilling to bend or see other perspectives when Mars is in the sign of Taurus. And since Mars brings in more and likes to move and likes action, you know, there can be gluttonous actions. We can be overindulgent because Mars can amplify Taurus, and Taurus wants the enjoyable things, right? So that is very much a possibility. But also so is sluggish or paused or reserved energy, because Mars in Taurus is going to be slowed by the sign, by that stable Earth sign. So Mars can amplify Taurus, but Taurus can also slow Mars at the same time. Venus in the sign of Cancer does not have any specific dignity that is present, but it's co-present with Jupiter in this sign, where it's going to be moving towards a conjunction with the exalted Jupiter here. So this feels like a very sweet space for Venus. Again, that connection between Venus and the moon, we've been talking about that connection between Taurus and Cancer, but also because it's moving towards that conjunction with the exalted Jupiter. Anytime you have a conjunction of the two benefic planets, the two most beneficial planets in the sky, and they are in one of the places where those two planets are exalted or in their home sign, that can be very beneficial, very positive, and feel very supportive, specifically in the sign of Cancer. So the loving, caring, supportive, gentle, nurturing tendencies of Cancer can be amplified as Venus moves into here. And we may really be wanting to feel into those sweet spaces, whether it's caring and nurturing for others or caring and nurturing for ourselves. I think that self-care is something that is going to be showing up for a lot of us over the next month or so, showing up for some of us. So these are some of the things that we have coming through here on Monday. There's a lot that's going on here this week. You know, we talked about a lot of Gemini coming through Monday. Now we're talking about Cancer things. The moon is moving from Gemini into the sign of Cancer, so the moon's going to act as an extra amplifier, an extra activator for some of these things here. So there we are on Monday. If we go ahead and move forward into Tuesday here, I'm going to just go ahead and bring this back here to these card spaces. You all let me know if you think these cards are helpful, or if you'd rather just let me keep the chart up, because I will do whatever is more helpful for you all. So let me know, send me a message or drop it down in the comments or something like that. I would really greatly appreciate that. Okay, so here we are, Tuesday, May 19th. The moon's in the sign of Cancer. It makes a square to the planets in the sign of Aries, Neptune and Saturn moving through there. Mercury's also going to be making a trine to Pluto. So Mercury, as that activator moving into Gemini, is getting a lot of action right off the get-go with the speed that it's moving, very quickly activating all of these different planets. When these two planets come together, especially within the trine, that is a Jupiterian type aspect, right? Things are expanded and things are inflated and they are highlighted through the trine. There's a lot of healing that can come through the trine as well, which I think will be helpful with this aspect. Mental expansion or exploration continues to open up here as Mercury makes yet another conjunction with the planets. So we have Uranus, interaction, not conjunction, but Uranus, Neptune, now moving into Pluto. So we're moving through these slower theme building planets here, right? The mental expansion and exploration continues, but this may be an opening. Instead of feeling like we're opening upward, like maybe we did with Uranus and Neptune, or opening out laterally, maybe we are opening by moving down into Plutonian spaces. So this feels like throughout the week, there's like a well-rounded opening. And maybe it's like we see things in front of us, and then we see things that are kind of symbolically above us in some sort of way. And then things that are symbolically below us. When I say below us or above us, that is not a positive or negative connotation. That is a symbolic spatial things, right? Things that are subterranean versus things that are maybe otherworldly in some sort of way. And then things that are maybe real-time material world, like 3D space type things. Okay. So opening down, moving deep, deep down here. Moving that to that which is subterranean, underground, that which is within the shadows, the discomforts, the subconscious and the unconscious, the dreams and the interpretations, the symbolisms that can show up in a multiplicity of type of ways. These are some of the things that we can see when Mercury and Pluto are coming into an interaction. I'm looking at the possibility of analyzing small or individual parts of a system, looking at the signs of these planets here for this aspect. Let's go ahead and put that chart back up so that way you all can see it. We're going to go ahead and move this forward into Tuesday so we can keep up here. Yeah, so Mercury and Pluto coming through here. Analyzing the small parts, Mercury in the sign of Gemini, right? Looking at the individual parts, pulling things apart, looking at little pieces of the system. The systems, the greater parts that we are looking at, the little teeny parts of, is Pluto in the sign of Aquarius. This may feel very airy, very mental, very idea and ideology extrapolating, because this is an air trine that we have coming through here. So really digging down and looking into little things of bigger things, small parts of a whole thing. There's an investigative impulse that can come through because Pluto drills down, digs deep, deep, deep down, right? Mercury in Gemini wants to ask lots of questions. It wants to understand. It's very curious and wants to bring new, it wants to get to the bottom of things too, especially when it's interacting with Pluto through the trine here. So investigative impulses, intense processes of moving down into things. Within that, there can definitely be conversations that pop up here, right? So intense yet healing or beneficial conversation showing up. Maybe this is the hard conversation that you have to have with somebody, and it's a trine, so it can be very healing depending on which way it shakes out. Mental depth, mental clarity, mental power and strength. Pluto can also be very cathartic and very purging. So a release of buildup of things. What has been building up within your mental sphere? What has been building up within the nervous system that has been exposed, and then we've been seeing there's a different way to do things, right? Is there something that needs to be released or something that needs to be purged now? Because Pluto is definitely going to help us pull things away if need be. And if we're holding or clinging onto things, then Pluto can pull things away in often some pretty intense type ways. As Mercury moves through the trine with Pluto, it's also moving into a square with the nodes of the moon. So it's squaring the north node in the sign of Pisces, but it's also squaring the south node in the sign of Virgo here at the same time. So when Mercury squares the lunar nodes, there's a mental challenge, right? Squares are challenges in general. Squares are challenges, and in the square to the nodes, it's mental challenges to where we're going and where we've been, right? The future and the past, what we are moving away from, what we are moving towards here. So to where you thought you were going and what you thought appealed to you, right? We've been in a process this week where maybe there's other perspectives that have been showing up. Maybe there's things that have been coming up and understandings, and not all of them might be things that are epiphany opening and bring us into good information coming in, right? It's all good information, but it might be things that are showing us where we need to release or where we need to let go in some sort of way. So this square coming through here might give us that mental challenge of I thought this was a good thing for me. I thought 3 cups of coffee were good because they help me get moving in the morning, but I've realized that maybe 2 is a good place to stop because it still gives me that boost, but it doesn't give me the jitters or the racing heart that 3 cups do, right? It could be something as simple as that. I'm looking at the karmic crossroads of the lunar nodes. The nodes give us our eclipses, and eclipses are longer cycles. Everything in the chart can be karmic, but the longer karmic cycles can be tracked through the eclipses and through the lunar nodes. So a karmic crossroads, an energetic tug and a pull, a mental paralysis, or clarity, depending on which way it plays out for us here. Seeing where you've been, yet where you're going, the whole path and the whole process. Squares, they always have the possibility to slow us down or make us pause. We have to kind of stop, reevaluate, and maybe shift or pivot directions in some sort of way. I've talked a lot lately about like turning a corner, so maybe you've heard me talk about that in our recent videos. When you have to kind of slowly pause in a process or a path for a moment just to analyze and see like where I've been, where I'm going, there's a natural reflection of that process, right? There's a natural moment of reflection. So reflecting on the path thus far is something that could be showing up here for some of us. Fated or unavoidable conversations, again, you know, Mercury's coming into contact with Pluto simultaneously with this aspect to the nodes here. So those unavoidable conversations are doubled up on by the nodes and by Pluto here coming through. So very possible that there's a lot of information coming through and a lot of communications in different way, whether that's within ourselves or within others at the same time here. So there we are on Tuesday. There is just a ton that is going on here this week. If we go ahead and move from Tuesday into Wednesday here, the sun moves into the sign Gemini. The sun moves into the sign of Gemini, and it's going to amplify the stellium that we're building here in the sign of Gemini. There is a bustling amount of energy that is going on here in Gemini. So when the sun moves into the Gemini, again, first of all, happy birthday to all of you Gemini suns. I hope you have a wonderful sun sign season. But this is adding to that mental stimulation of Gemini, highlighting the multiplicity through these multiple planets that we have in this bustling activated area. The sun highlights or illuminates the space that it's in. So this is amplifying the action that we have in the sign of Gemini. Gemini suns are often energetic, curious, interested individuals. They may seem non-committal or have a lack of attention or being able to focus, but like I said earlier, this really is just that there's many things that catch their eye and interest, and they are generally curious and interested in multiple different things. We can think about the interplay of light and dark. We can think about the twins. There's a light and a dark twin within this space, right? So this is the space of light, but there's a subtle handover of the dark at 0 degrees of Cancer that is slowly sneaking in. 0 Cancer is the middle of summer, zodiacally speaking, but it begins the slow descent into darkness. After 0 Cancer in the northern hemisphere, we slowly start to lose minutes of our day, but we don't really notice it yet. It's a little bit sneaky here. It's almost hard to notice that descend into darkness or that descend into matter. The dark half of the year representing matter, earth in the physical realm and existence. The light half of the year representing infinite knowledge and understanding and the greater prospects of life and seeing greater ideas and greater thinkings and understandings and the greater processes of the workings of all of existence. So it's much more existential, where the dark half of the year is much more about matter and coming down into the material world versus moving up into the higher realms in the light half of the year here. It's almost hard to notice that shift, that hands over is coming in the sign of Gemini. And you can see that trickster archetype that we can see in Gemini, that mischief, or there's something that it's a little bit sneaky and something that's a little bit unsuspected that is showing up here. Gemini likes to change its mind. It likes to stay open to interpretation and to information input. Again, it's a mutable sign that is handing over begins the ascent from the light half of the year into the dark half of the year. So it's playing within both worlds, right, in sneaky ways. It's Mercury, it's Hermes. Mercury is that messenger god that moves from the material world into the energetic world. It brings messages. It's the guider of souls that goes back and forth here. So you have that interplay. That paradoxical shifting energy is amplified here when you look at the myth of Hermes as the messenger that can move between spaces and worlds. And as we mentioned earlier, it's gender fluid based on the phasal dynamics here. So other planets have that assigned gender, where again, Mercury does not. It's also the only planet to find its domicile and exaltation in one sign, which is the sign of Virgo, and its 2 signs are square to each other. So these are paradoxical things in the astrological world that align with Mercury. So we see that within the sign of Gemini. When we talk about sun sign seasons, this is the moment that I like to point out that everybody born over a 30-day period has the same sun sign. There's a lot of people that will say, I don't resonate with my sun sign, right? but they can resonate with other parts of their chart. It's because there's so much more than just the sun sign to look at and to play into a factor here. So yes, the sun sign is important within our chart and where we find the sun, but looking at both the sign and the houses in our experiences and the relativity of our lives and our personal experience really paints the picture, which is why astrological consultations as a conversation back and forth really bring in the most amount of information. So maybe that's a Gemini opening insight for somebody in some sort of way. So there we are on Wednesday. Happy birthday to all of you Gemini suns. All right, moving forward here as the aspects continue. Thursday, May 21st. We have the moon in the sign of Leo, and Venus is going to be moving into a square with Neptune here. So we had the interaction with, excuse me, we had the interaction through the sextile with Mercury and Neptune, and now we're going to have the square between Venus and Neptune coming through here. Wondering about questions of faith, understandings, and connections. We talked about that deep inspiration, otherworldly inspiration of Neptune here this week. So faith, feeling things within us, intuition, all very Neptunian. When we're in the square, there's that challenge or there's that disconnect, right? So maybe there's questions of faith of some kind, of understandings of our connection. Wondering about feeling emotionally connected, Venus in the sign of Cancer, versus feeling disconnected. Neptune can connect us deeply to things, but it can also give illusions of separation in different ways too. So are we feeling connected or are we feeling disconnected? Neptune in Aries is very fiery, very passionate, and emotions can come on very, very strong with Neptune in the sign of Aries. So when it's a square to Venus in the sign of Cancer, the emotional water sign, where they're interacting and they're talking, but they're having maybe a little bit of a difficult conversation, maybe we don't always feel like we are supported. Maybe there's a support system that it feels like is lacking in some sort of way. Cancer is such a sensitive, tender space that when it's square to Neptune, boundaries and containers may blur, and then you can start to feel that lack of support system, but it's still co-present with Jupiter. So keep that in mind here. If the square feels a little bit difficult, there's still some sort of support or insight there for us if we that we are moving towards, right? So it's like we're gravitating towards that support. It's like when you had a really rough day and you feel disconnected and you are like making your way home, or you're making your way to your grandmother's house so she can give you a nice comforting hug and, you know, a nice talk or something like that. Wondering about disenchantment as these two planets are coming together in the square. Neptune can enchant us and can give us lots of ideas. We talked a lot about that type of stuff with Mercury and Neptune this week. But again, through the square, disenchantment, removing the rose-colored glasses or slowing enough to be able to see and feel the illusion that maybe Aries, Neptune in Aries has shown for some of us. Also wondering about the call to stand up, to provide, or to nurture in some sort of way. Those are Cancerian themes, and Neptune is in the superior position, and Neptune likes to inspire. In the sign of Aries, those inspirations and those sparks may fly very, very quickly. So if Venus in the sign of Cancer wants to give care, wants to give support, and it wants to nurture and give a tender space to be able to grow from, Neptune in Aries may move that passion or that drive very, very quickly, where we find ourselves acting on it without even maybe realizing that we are acting on it. So the call to stand up, to provide, to nurture, to provide some sort of peace, ease, or comfort, and to overcome those things either for ourselves or for others. This may show us where the lack of self-care has been, right? We can't show up for others if we don't show up for ourselves here. So pulling both of those things in here. As the sun moves into the sign of Gemini, it's going to move into the conjunction with Uranus. So we have that coming through here this week too. That's Thursday night into Friday. This adds to the excitement, to the change, and to the release that can be coming through here. When any planet comes into contact with the sun, it's amplified or it's illuminated or it's put on display or on highlight. It's like it steps onto a podium of some kind here. So the release, the liberation, the rebelling, or the wanting to go against the status quo or break free or break through from something is amplified here. Experimentation, curiosity on high. Stimulating energy, motivating or flow inducing, again, versus overstimulating with all this Gemini energy. Make sure we are slowing down, taking breaths, touching grass, grounding yourself, whatever it is that you have to do to slow yourself down. Writing might feel very, very grounding during this Gemini season here for us here. And overall, highlighting Uranus in the sign of Gemini. If whether or not you feel like you've seen the sparks of Uranus entering the sign of Gemini, this week might really amplify it by these planets, Mercury, Sun, that are coming into the conjunction with Uranus here. So highlighting Uranus and Gemini through these Mercury and Sun conjunctions may have us really feeling the inner workings of Uranus in Gemini in our charts and in our lives here. So whew, there is a ton of energy that just keeps rolling here through this week. Guys, we're not done with it yet either, because we're going to go ahead and move forward into Friday, and we're going to get more Mercury aspects. So we get more Gemini action through these aspects. Mercury sextile Saturn. Again, the sextiles are not always the loudest, but Mercury's got a lot to say here coming through here this week, so I think that amplifies it. This should bring us some stability. It should bring us a container, but I'm thinking about this through a little bit different perspective. Thank you, all the Gemini energy that's coming through here. Saturn's in its fall in the sign of Aries, right? So the container might not feel typical, traditionally Saturnian, like we would expect to feel. It may feel like a space that holds but moves at the same time. When I think of a Saturn container, I think about something that is immovable, something that is solid, like the foundation of a house. So maybe now we have the foundation, but maybe it's on wheels. So maybe the foundation and the structure and the container that we're given is an RV rather than a stationary house that is on a plot of land in some kind of way. So it's a container to hold, but it's on wheels, and we're moving at the same time here. Does the container shake? Does it agitate or mix what's within it? Mixing can be beneficial. Think about baking and mixing different ingredients, or mixing up soil of different kinds to bring in different properties or qualities. But as long as we don't overstir. So when you're making some sort of batter, you need to mix and incorporate those ingredients, but you can overmix it, and then you don't get the consistency or the fluffiness or the denseness that you want in the end result of the recipe. So that's just a little symbolic food for thought here as this interaction is coming through here. Unconventional containers are creative ways of holding space. It's still a focus, it's still a maturity, it's still a space to pause and consider before moving on. But just wondering how the perspective might shift of what Saturn containers might look like for some of us. Saturn in Aries wants to create Saturnian spaces, but it might not know exactly how to, or it might not have the tools to be able to do what it likes to do because it's in an unfamiliar space. Saturn is exalted in Libra, the sign that is opposite of Aries. So we get it in its fall in the sign of Aries. Gemini is willing to try something new. Saturn still wants to give us containers. Gemini is willing to try something new. Hey, let's see if we can hold space a different way than we have before. So again, perspective shift, different conversations that are coming through here that are slightly different than what we are used to having here. Same time, Venus is making an interaction with the nodes of the moon too. She's going to be trining the north node while she's sextiling the south node here. This feels very much like healing on the path, and healing with a tendency towards the north node, pull towards the Piscean experience, otherworldly explorations of emotions, creations, and connections coming through here, artistic or romantic expressions, daydreaming about the future. You know, the north node is something that pulls us towards it, right? It's something dreamy, something romantic, something that appeals to us here. Venus is in a trine to the north node, and in the sign of Cancer, she's moving towards that path, but she wants to do so in a supportive type way, right? She wants to explore, but she wants to do it from a space of safety, a space where emotions can be heard, where creations can feel like they're coming from someplace meaningful. The connections or the artistic and romantic expressions of Venus can be amplified with the north node because it's something that appeals to us. So it's something that maybe we do romanticize, or something that feels like it has a creative force behind it in some sort of way. At the same time, there's a sextile to the south node. So if there's something that we need to release to be able to feel into that creativity, that space might be there as well. Daydreaming about the future. Cancer doesn't always move the fastest. Sometimes it can. It's a cardinal sign, so it does move, but it moves in watery ways. And I think about water can rush and it can move quickly, but usually the flow of water starts a little slow and then it builds up and then it moves into a rush of some sort of kind, right? So like if there's rushing water, often that's from like, if it's a space that doesn't typically have rushing water, it might be from rainfall that has come, so that like there's a buildup that happens first, and then the river starts moving faster because there's just more water within that space. If Mercury feels like a challenge or a wall or something to go up against with the square to the nodes, this might feel like it brings healing, it might bring peace, it might bring unity, because that's what Venus wants to do, especially in the sign of Cancer, and it has the tendency towards the North Node. So healing towards the space that we can move, right? What healing can you bring in, or what kind of reconciliation can you bring in to be able to move forward, or to take these new perspectives that have shown up and then put that into a plan and action, or into motivation in some sort of way. It could just be an encouraging look at where you've been and where you've come from. Again, the North Node is spaces that we are moving towards, or what calls us or what pulls us. The South Node is a point of release, a place of experience, a place of which we've already been and we've already done things there. It's also a point of familiarity and comfort. So healing and an encouraging look at these different spaces. Support in a difficult or paused space. You know, we got Mercury squaring the nodes this week here, so it may feel like you're in between spaces, that energetic tug and pull, or the karmic crossroads here. If you're in that pause space, this might feel like a little bit of support, like a hand on your shoulder as you are moving through the multiplicity of things here. We have Mercury and Pluto coming through here this week too, right? Healing feels like a generally positive thing, but there can be a lot of difficult things, especially with Pluto, to get to the healing. So multiplicity and duality and polarity of experience is definitely on display here this week, which is on par for Gemini season, and so much Gemini energy that we have coming through here. All right. Let's go ahead and move forward into Saturday, the only other day that we don't have any exact aspects that are coming through here. So we follow the moon from the sign of Leo into the sign of Virgo, which is Mercury's other sign. Just another little tip of the hat to Mercury here this week. Guys, there's a ton of energy. There's a ton of different aspects that are going on here. There's a lot of different moving parts that feel like they are intermingled and mixing in here. The moon is activating different aspects that are coming through here. Mars and Venus are moving together. They are having a conversation as they shift signs. Mars is moving from a place where it has dignity to a place where it does not have dignity, where it actually has a negative connotation in the dignity scheme. But Venus is there to help and support. So that supportive conversation comes through many different ways this week with Venus. The square to the nodes from Mercury, Venus comes behind with the favorable sextile and trine aspect here. So the support that Cancer likes to provide, Venus is going to be able to bring some of that through here this week. Meanwhile, there's a ton of conversations that are happening in the sign of Gemini. Different eye-opening, different perspective shifting experiences, different conversations. See how we can be open. See how we can be open, yet grounded and supported here this week, as all these different conversations come in. All right, it's a lot of information. If it's helpful to review and look back at different parts of this, definitely do so. We will be talking about some of these things in a container in a shortened, abbreviated space at our live meditation Sunday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. So come join us there. We will continue the conversation and take that conversation inward a little bit together here. I look forward to seeing you live meditation. I look forward to seeing you next week here for the next live video. And I hope everybody has a wonderful week. Take care. Remember to take deep breaths, open your perspectives, have conversations, be curious, yet feel supported and grounded. Feels like a great way to move into the week. That is my wish for each and every one of you and myself. All right, till next time, take care. Have a wonderful week.